The Huawei P20 is the unloved, overlooked and ignored model in the P20 series, where the Lite and the Pro are more likely to show up when you search for the phone on the internet. But is it not being talked about for a reason, or are smartphone shoppers really missing out? Hey guys, my name is Ryan Thomas with Failtech, and this is the Huawei P20 review. I recently bought this stunning example off eBay for £300, including a few accessories, but no box unfortunately. And that's a weird price point for me because that sits in between affordable smartphones and kind of flagship killers like the OnePlus of yesteryear or maybe even the Poco phone. But let's talk about how this thing surprisingly impressed me in almost every aspect. I'm serious because it shocked Katie and I both as soon as we got it out of the packaging. Those authentication methods. Yes, the basic face unlock feature could be seen as gimmicky, but a lot of people like it since the iPhone does it, so it's nice to see it here as well. And without a doubt, it is rapid. Might not be as secure as Face ID and it might not have all those sensors, but it's definitely a good gimmick to have, I suppose. But that fingerprint scanner is world class. I mean, seriously fast. It sits on its lonesome below the display and above the USB-C port, although my preference is to have it on the back, kind of like the Pixel 2 devices. But without a doubt, this is the fastest scanner I've ever tested. And I knew Huawei were good going into this. They've been renowned for having fast fingerprint scanners, but this is just instant. You just barely tap it and it's away. It's there, it's fast, and it's very accurate. It actually recognised my fingerprint more than pretty much every other scanner that I've tested anyway. And if you really like, you can use it as a navigation pad because Huawei in its software allows you to change navigation methods to on-screen buttons, an on-screen kind of gesture-based system, or scanner pad gestures. And I have to talk about how the phone felt to use because that, needless to say, did surprise me as well. It has a certain sophistication, classiness, dare I say James Bond aesthetic and feel to it, which I haven't experienced personally since I picked up the Galaxy S7 Edge in 2016. This black model is certainly understated, and that's perhaps not to everyone's taste, I get that, but the combination of subtly curved metal and plain glass certainly looks stunning. It feels cold in the morning, dense but not too weighty, small but not too old, and just seems to fit the right amount of people's hands. Perhaps due to the screen size or maybe due to the fantastic use of space. The volume and lock buttons feel crisp and tactile, which I'm a fan of, and especially that subtle little accent colour on the power button. But perhaps the lack of headphone jack feels a bit because they did it. And although that's not something I like, I don't think I can blame Huawei specifically because the industry is just going in that direction. But it's not perfect by any means. It lacks ingress protection, which is a big letdown for me personally, and more importantly to a lot of people, it doesn't have wireless charging, making that still very beautiful back slightly redundant. And the top bezel isn't the same thickness as the side bezels for some reason, though I do not retract my claims for this being a fantastically designed device. The horizontal branding and text on the rear encourages you to turn your phone to landscape, to use it as a camera. And what a camera setup this phone has. It has been enough to convert Katie to Android after using iOS for over half a decade now. Specs are excellent and really do stand out from the competition. The dual setup on the back makes excellent use of a 12 megapixel optically stabilized main camera and a 20 megapixel monochrome sensor for low light and depth mapping. And the front 24 megapixel shooter is uniquely sharp, and those video shooting modes are just excellent. Huawei really does have you covered in terms of the camera. Starting with selfies, once you disable the beautification filter, results are clear, crisp, sport pretty true to life colours and seem to be up there, if not better than the likes of the OnePlus 6. And that 1080p selfie video doesn't disappoint either. Its heavily software-based stabilisation crops in more than I'd like, but it does offer excellent stability and fluidity, which is important to those of you who kind of want to use your phone to vlog. And for the rear camera, well, that's another story altogether. In Cornwall the other week, we had a stunning sunset, and it made for some great photos. Check out my Instagram if you haven't already. And the P20 with its night mode was especially fun to play with. The colours tend to look a little bit saturated, almost extremely saturated, and not in a tasteful Samsung kind of way, in a I've just let my 5-year-old play with my Lightroom presets kind of way. Though this isn't always the case, and as long as you turn off the weird AI, you get some natural looking colours. Otherwise, natural bokeh is there, and sharpness of the 12 megapixel sensor will not let you down. I find dynamic range to be surprisingly good, even coming from an iPhone 10 and Pixel 2. Low light photography, even in the plain Jane photo mode, produce some very usable images, but even better in that night mode. Portrait mode looks good, but not perfect, definitely getting there, and you can see some of the photos with believable depth of field. Edge detection is definitely the weak point, but I was expecting far worse and was, again with the theme of this video, very surprised. In video mode, whilst the UHD video at 30fps isn't the coolest or the best spec in the world, The more worrying is the lack of stabilization at UHD, which you have to step down to FHD at 30p to utilize. Honestly, I'm not as disappointed as most reviewers, but it would have been nice to see. I like the UHD video though. It's detailed, sharp, maintains good dynamic range, has quick focus and looks clean, but that Full HD video is just so much smoother that I shoot with that most of the time anyway. It makes more sense to me to have better stabilization than to have more pixels. Slow motion. How about that 720p 960 FPS slow motion? Yes, it's burst mode, and yes, the quality can take a heavy hit, but this mode is just so much fun to play with, and I spent a good amount of time messing around with it. But none of this compares to the incredible mode selection and software of the P20's camera, which has to be one of, if not the best camera apps of all time in my opinion. The vast array of buttons, modes, options, preferences, they just make it super versatile. And the manual mode is awesome for someone just starting out in videography and photography, since you can pick auto, or you can really delve in and change the settings and make it your own. The 5.8-inch 2240 by 1080 LTPS IPS display is rather impressive, yet subtly so. It gets bright for an IPS IMO and is exceptionally sharp, something that Katie pointed out in seconds after using the thing. But imagine this as a metaphor for the entire phone. A fantastic panel, but is overshadowed by the slightly better panel in the older sibling. The spec sheet is odd because although it looks to be a pretty high performance panel, it contains some really odd figures like the 18.7 by 9 aspect ratio. What's going on with that? In practice, I found EMUI's approach to the notch refreshingly useful for an Android device. It keeps plenty of info up at the top, and IMO looks clean and even better when hidden using Huawei's software tools. And because of the LCD-based IPS technology inside, we are getting fantastic viewing angles, great colours, very accurate colours, and I found games were surprisingly fun to play on this thing. I wasn't expecting it on such a small device. I expect this is due to the combination of ergonomic chassis and responsive screen, or maybe it's just placebo, but anyway, the main interaction point with this phone is fantastic, and it's got me rethinking OLED, just like Motorola did with the X4. Huawei's spec sheet has to be one of the best and most well-rounded for a £300 device. Sure, we miss out on creature comforts like expandable storage or the latest build of Android, but what we get in return is a high-end system configuration, 10nm system on a chip, and a good amount of RAM, if nothing special. Performance numbers and statistics are good, and day-to-day use is as fluid as a £300 phone should realistically be, in my opinion. Though in some 3D games like Fortnite, you're going to have to turn down the settings a smidge, as I found there to be just a few hangs in that application specifically. And that's where the software comes in. See, EMUIs are controversial for being bloated, heavy, and as far from stock as you can really get. And whilst I tend to agree with the heaviness, there are some really useful pieces of software trickery and a good selection of features to enhance the experience to a level where I feel we can all give it a go. The default home launcher is terrible, although it does give you an option to add an app drawer if you don't want to install a third-party launcher like I did, which of course was Nova. And the amount of installed apps is stupid. Like, even after I disabled and deleted as many as I could, I ended up with a pretty terrible experience. There are multiple navbar customizations, including removing it all together and using the touchpad, creating more screen real estate, and the notch hiding feature really does make the phone look better and cleaner in my opinion. A truly impressive implementation that I feel a lot of notch haters will gravitate towards. Not to mention the double knock to screenshot, super handy if you're taking photos with buttons on the same side of the phone, which you kind of have to do hand yoga to do that. And the included screen resolution tool is fantastic for even further elongating the battery life. And talking of battery life, arguably the most important thing in a smartphone, is it any good on the P20? Yes, without a doubt. Yes, the 3400 mAh battery is decently large for the phone's physical size, but I feel the EMUI and the 10nm Kirin 970 also take part and make the difference that results in around 5 hours of screen on time, a figure that most smartphones these days just cannot get to. I'm serious, this has to be one of the best phones I've ever tested on this channel when it comes to battery life, and it's definitely not the biggest battery I've ever tested. The lack of wireless charging is definitely an off-putting thing for some people, but the fast charging is so impressive, and honestly I really didn't need the fast charging. I used it throughout the entire day and I ended the day with around 30%, and I'm a pretty heavy power user. This thing just did not skip a beat, and I didn't need to top up at lunchtime like I do with most other phones, so the fast charging was kind of redundant, and the wireless charging, well, I never needed to use that either. Odd things I found were the fairly decently bassy speaker on the thing, and it kind of uses the earpiece as a dual like stereo pair. The bottom firing speaker was decently loud, but the earpiece speaker was almost silent. Very quiet, maybe it was just my unit, but I noticed it was very quiet when watching a YouTube video, like you could tell it was being used, like you could cover it up and it would make a difference. But if you covered up the bottom speaker, you could barely hear anything out of the earpiece. Also, some apps don't fit the weird aspect ratio display, but that's kind of a natural thing. And there is a tool within Huawei software to try and alleviate this problem. And then the weirdest thing for me is that there's a torch app, but there's also a torch tool in the quick settings toggle, and the app doesn't seem to have any extra settings. So I'm not sure what this is, and you cannot disable or remove it. I might be stupid, so please do let me know in the comments if there is like more of an option that I'm just not checking out or that I haven't noticed, but in my testing, it just seems to be a pointless application that you can't get rid of. Conclusion time then. Is the P20 a good phone, and more importantly, should you buy one? Well, for the same money, you can get an LG V30, Pixel 2 regular, a Galaxy S8 or a Mi Mix 2, and whilst I found the P20 to be a bit of a niche phone that'll wow some and deter others, my belief is that this is an exceptionally well-made device with more tools and class than most, and really does make me reminisce my experience of the Galaxy S7 Edge during the best year of my life. And maybe that makes me biased, but to everyone I've shown this phone to, they've been impressed, I've been impressed, and I'm sure you'll be impressed. Before we end the video, I just want to let you guys know that I am changing my upload schedule, so I'm going to be uploading on Tuesdays and Saturdays, but it'll be the same time during the day, but you just need to select the different days. So Tuesdays and Saturdays starting next week. And that's been it from me. Please do like, dislike, comment and subscribe if you're new around here to never miss a video like this one. Also check out my social medias and other links in the video description to talk with me and my community, because you guys are fantastic. And talking of fantastic, my patrons, you guys are stunning. Thank you so much for your support. And if you feel like being awesome, go and check me out on Patreon, support me on there as well for some unique behind the scenes videos. My name's been Ryan Thomas with Failtech, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.